Hey, what's going on everybody? This is Jacob Vile. Today on my laptop doing a video today on subwoofer box tuning as well as subwoofer specs and how I pretty much look into it, and I keep it really simple and broken down in this video. So I'll kind of show you this is how I tune my box as well as how I know my cubic space, how I figure out the measurements, all using the 12volt.com subwoofer box calculator. So this is the site you're going to want to, I suggest, I don't say this is the only one, but this is where I always go, the 12volt.com. And just you can literally just Google the 12 volt subwoofer box calculator, and it shows you got calculators for fractions between decimal and fraction. You got parallel calculator, series calculator, round port, slot port, your volume calculator. You can do volume calculator of a square, of a triangle. Of course, you have options of if you're going to be a square and a triangle together, and then of course volumes of a cylindrical object as well. So there's a lot of different options that you can look into, but this site I have used ever since I started car audio for the past like 6 years, so when I first started. So I'm going to go ahead and dig into it, and I'm going to use the concept of my single 10-inch subwoofer box as a reference point for this. So I know all of the specs of my 10-inch subwoofer box, 4th order build I have, so I'm going to explain this in this video on this. If you're curious about what my system is before, if you haven't already seen it, check out other videos on my channel before so you would kind of understand where I'm going with this. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and type in my specs of my box because I know what they are. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick on my PowerPoint, which is where I normally like to use as a tool as well. So my specs of my box is, this is the things you're going to want to know for your box. So if you get a box, you don't know what it is, this is what you're going to need to do. So you need to know your box specs. The first thing you want to do is the width, length, height. So those are the 3 specs you're going to want to know of your box. So it's literally just the outside measurements. So I know my outside measurements of my box. So my length is right around 38 inches for the actually it's not height, it's this one's depth, width, depth. Sorry. So 38 inches is my depth. My width is right around a 40 inch, and my height is at 16 inch. So this is gross. So this is the height that you want to go with on a gross scale. So you measure the outside diameters of your box. So I'll give you an example real quick, just so you guys can get a concept on this. So I have a box here. This is my front view. So front view. So then that's my depth and my width. So I know my depth. Whoops. There we go. So my depth is going to be this view. So it's easier to use this if I use a CAD model view. So my front view, my side view, and then I'll have my back view in the back. So top view. So my top view is going to be the same length except it's wider. Alright, there we go. So there's my concept. So I have my side view, which is, this is about right where it is, and then my front view, and then my top view. So there's the depth here. Alright, so that's my depth, and then my width is how wide it is, and then my height is how tall it is. So that's my height is how tall it is. My width is pretty much left to right, looking forward. And if I can just add one more box in here real quick, I can show you exactly how the concept is if you look at my video to see, hey, now I know exactly what you're looking into. So this is right where my port is. So that's where my port is. And that's pretty self-explanatory from there. Alright, so there we go. So there's my port, my front view, my side view, my top view, so you guys can kind of see where that is. And then of course you don't want to consider baffle here. So the baffle would mean, what is your baffle? Your baffle is your wood thickness. So if you go to these calculators, you'll see the wood thickness on the one when I'm going to start in a second. So I'll show you the specs of my box. So this is just a rough estimate on everything. So I might be a few inches off on one of these measurements, but this is what I remember on top of my head without looking into anything. Alright, so now I'm going to go into the calculator. So first I want to know what my volume is. So what is my volume? So my volume is going to be what I find out in the calculator. I don't calculate this on my own. You can calculate it on your own, but I personally have never done it. I just use the calculator. So I go to my volume calculator. I have my width, height, and depth. So what I'm going to do is I get my 3 specs. Alright, so my width is 40. My depth is 38. That's how deep it is. just like I explained, and my height is 16 inches. So my thickness, this one's very important because if I put 0.75 for one thickness bet, that's how that is, and if I go by 1.5, then that's what my depth, my space is. So I did double baffle everywhere because I know that's my baffle thickness, so I did 2 baffles, which a baffle is normally 0.75 inches. So I'll put that in there. Baffle thickness is 1.5 inches. So that's something that's very important because that can really throw off anything. And keep in mind that this concept that I'm using in this video, I've done for every build I've done. From my single subwoofer builds to my 2 subwoofer concept ported enclosures that are non-wall to my wall build where I had 418s walled, as well as a 4th order case scenario where I had a sealed section. So you can use the same concept. So you would just have 2 boxes if you're into a bandpass. So you would have your views on a sealed section scale and then on the ported section scale, and if you're 6th order you'd have two ported section scales as a reference. And you don't have to do all of this stuff to do it, you can just write it on paper, but this is a good way to represent me showing you on a visual level in PowerPoint that I'm using. So my volume is right at 9.7. okay, so that's what my volume is. This is gross, or net, sorry. So that's net. Now I'll show you what gross is. Gross would be 0. So this is my gross. Look at the difference just by putting in your baffle. Alright, so 14 cubes gross, 9.7 cubes net. So that's right around, that's a little bit over. So I'll go ahead and change this because I know I was right around net of 7. So I'm going to go ahead and go with 36. That might be a little closer to where it is. Nope, 34. I remember now. 34 inches. Sorry about that. But anyway, concept is what you want to use in this. So, yep, that's a little better. So it's probably 35. So right around 9 was my interior net. So 35 inches. Anyway, but I could play around with it, but I'm not out there looking in measurements to remember on top of my head. But that's the concept. I have my top, right, and front view, side and front view. Got my 3 measurements. Find that out. All right, so now I got my specs. I know right around where my cubic space is. So I'm at 8.9, so right at that, and then I find out my gross. So using this calculator, that's how I figured those out. So gross means no displacement removal, wood displacement, brace, etc., and then net. Alright, so now that I have that, now I need to find out, well, what is my box tuned to? But let's just assume I already know my sealed box space. So since I'm a 4th order, I have a sealed box in there. I know what that space is taking up. It's 2.5 cubes roughly, right around, yeah, 2.5 cubes that I'm removing from that. So I already know I need to eliminate that from it. So if I do 8.9 minus 2.5, so 876, so that's 6.4 cubes. So I'm right around 6.4 cubes net after I have my I removed my final displacement of my sealed box. So of course you got to watch my videos if you haven't seen my build. So that's how I figured that out. Let me pull the calculator just to confirm because I'm not perfect. 8.9 minus the 2.5 is 6.4. Yep, so 6.4 cubes net. Alright, so that's right around, that's the most important number I need to know, is 6.4 cubes net to start going into tuning. So I know my box is 6.4 cubes net, and that is not including subwoofer displacement if it's inverted. That's just including the outside terminal space of my sealed section. Alright, so now that I use my calculator for this, I figured out what my box space is on a gross scale with 0, and then I know I had 2 baffles, so on a net scale, so right at 9 cubes. So now I'm going to go in here and do my calculator. So this is another thing that you want to look into if you're finding out your subwoofer box port tuning, and this is how I do this. So your port width and height, so this is where you're going to go into a little bit more of a strategic concept on this. So you need to know what your height and your width is. Your width and height of your port. So I know what my port width is right at 5 inches. Alright. And my height is 14 inches. So remember that this can change depending on what variables you have and adjustments, and it's not defining anything unless you change it. So it's defined as what it was built, whether you built it or somebody else built it. These are defined measurements, but they can be altered depending on what you improve on, you change, if you readjust your port, you add to it, you remove from it. There's a lot of things you do depending on your enclosure. But let's just say you got a prefab box, and this was the specs I had. So I can't change it. I'm not going to modify it right now. So this is the specs on my box. This is this is real world what I have in my box. 5 inches wide by 14 high. That's not including your actual baffle or anything. That's just the reference of that. So I have 5 inches wide, 14 high. Now my box cube space, this is going to be your net number. So you want to use your net number for that. So 6.4 is my box, but I'm going to go ahead and just say 6 because I have sub displacement. So my sub displacement is right around 0.2 cubes. So your subwoofer displacement is another thing you want to subtract from it. So that's not my net. My net final would actually be 6.2 cubes net final, because you got to subtract the sub displacement since it's inverted. But of course I have a couple pieces of 2x4s as well, so it would be slightly under, so that's why I'm just going to go with 6 just to be on the safe side. It can always be a little more or less, but anyway, that's the concept there. Alright, so 6 cubes. And my tuning frequency, let's just say this is to find out your port length, but you can play with your frequency to find out what your true port length already is. So my port length right now, I know, is right around 5 to 7 inches. So I'll find out my box tuning from that. So box is tuned to around 48 to 50 hertz. It's looking like so. And of course you can adjust your internal space, not your internal space, but your frequency to find out exactly where that is. You can adjust your box volume, because once you know what that's set at, then that's pretty much finalized. So the only thing you can adjust is your port width and height, as well as your tuning frequency, to identify where your port length needs to be or what tuning frequency needs to be. So let's say my goal was to be tuned to 42 hertz. Okay, so my port length needs to be right over 10 length. So my port length here, this will make it a little bit more in depth. So my port length here, this is important. So my port's on that side, so port length is right here. So this is the length of the port, and this is going to be adjusted depending on your goals. So your port length will be longer or shorter depending on where your tuning you want to be, and of course your port area changes length and width here. It's easier to adjust your width over your length because it's kind of defined over the, it's easier to adjust your width than your height unless you were to plug it or add something to it or reduce it. It just depends on the port. Every system's different. But anyway, this is the concept of how you figure out the port tuning. So my port length was right around right here. So that's where my port length was. It was, let's just say 5 inches. So port length 5 inches, and that's the width. So I get the 5 inches because of the 2x4 stack, and then I have a little PVC roundover. So there's my port there, and it kind of lines off. Anybody that does CAD or is in engineering, they understand the view, and then you have an isometric here. I could have like the subwoofer box view of all three, but I don't use any software right now for that. Alright, so there's the specs of this. That's the concept. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. This is a great site. No promotion or anything, just 12volt.com, subwoofer box calculator. Google it. I'll put the link in the description. And that's me pretty much showing you how I calculated my slot port tuning as well as my volume. So it's that straightforward. If you have a port that is cylindrical or circle, you can just do it. It's actually easier to calculate with circle than it is port length slotted, because you have one less number. You literally just have diameter. You don't have width and length for slots. So, and it gets even more tricky if you go into triangle ports or like a square and oval port, because then you kind of have to calculate both. But depending on how in-depth you want to get with it. But this is the concept. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but I'm sure it's within 85 to 90%. I know for sure because right now, for example, my box is tuned at right where, what did it say it was? I was tuned at 47 hertz, I think it was. Yep. So I'm tuned right around 48 hertz, but I'm peaking at 45, 46 hertz. So it's like within 2 to 3 hertz of my frequency range. But it also depends on your peak resonance and how your vehicle reacts to it for your port adjustment. But if you were to play, if you look at the other video with subwoofer box tuning to identify it just by playing test tones, you'll see that this plays a really key role with identifying how close it really is too. So you're not going to be dead on within a hertz, but you'll be within 3 to 5 hertz for sure. That's your variance, 3 to 5 hertz max. It just depends on the box, the build, and the cabin space. Alright, so that's this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. If y'all have any questions, feel free. And of course, always, I'll leave it at that. Like, comment, please, and subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see y'all next time. Hope this helps somebody with something. So.